It's Catherine with part 3. For this exercise, let's say that our spiritual ideal is currently going to be forgiveness, or forgiveness would be written under the first column labeled My Spiritual Ideal. Under the second column, we need to begin listing my mental attitudes, those attitudes which help build that spirit of forgiveness in our relationships with others and with ourselves. Perhaps we'll decide compassion is an attitude we'll work towards in relation to a frustrating parent. Maybe openness is the mental attitude we want to begin holding in regard to one of our children with whom we've been having difficulty. And possibly patience best describes that attitude we need to use with ourselves. Our mental attitude, our ideals chart should list all the people in our lives with whom we need to exercise the spiritual ideal of forgiveness, plus a positive mental attitude suggesting how we'll begin working with each one. The third column is the most detailed, the one where we list all the physical activities we'll begin doing in relationship to specific individuals. My physical activities should simply reflect the mental attitudes to hold in relationship to the spiritual ideal. For example, in the case of ourselves and the mental attitude of patience, perhaps each of the following could be appropriate activities to help build the same attitude. Stop saying or even thinking, I can't. Make a list of every instance where I myself have been forgiven for something. Begin praying that I will have the determined endurance to go forward, etc. Each attitude and person should have next to it a list of multiple activities with which we'll be working. These activities should map out ways to bring the spiritual ideal into the material world. We'll know that progress has been made with our spiritual ideal when the mental attitude listed on the ideal sheet becomes our usual state of mind, and our physical activity becomes our automatic and natural response. As we really begin to work with ideals, making them a part of who we are, can then choose a more challenging direction, a brighter North Star towards which we can a more bright star which we can point our lives. The important thing is work with ideals, for by working with them, we'll discover what it is we should be doing. Then we no longer will have to concern ourselves with the timing. Wherever you are, whether in Hartford or Sing Sing or Kalamazoo or Timbuktu, it's one and the same. The Lord is God of the universe, wherever thou art. For each soul finds self in that place which it occupies in the present only by the grace of God. Then use this today, that period. If it is used properly, then the next is pointed out. Edgar Cayce Reading, 3356-1. As we work with ideals, we'll discover that they need to be fine-tuned, becoming even more challenging with the passing of time. For example, if one of our ideals is gentleness of speech, we would continue to work with it, even across the breakfast table, until it becomes a part of us. Once our conversation began to match up with gentleness of speech, we might reword our ideal to reword our ideal to friendliness, and maybe a dozen others in our mental attitudes and our physical activities. Eventually, we might find that we've grappled successfully with gentleness of speech, friendliness, and maybe a dozen others of dealing with some aspect of service or improving relationships or unconditional love. For each of our smaller ideals, a portion of something greater than we wish becomes, but perhaps in the beginning is out of reach. Ultimately, there is one ideal. Although the readings encourage us to choose a personal ideal, they also assert that there is one ideal. One individual was told, there is one way, but there are many paths. Edgar Cayce Reading, 3083-1. In essence, what this suggests is that each of us moving towards the ultimate ideal, whether we want to label the ideal perfection, or Christ consciousness or God consciousness or which whatever term with which we're personally comfortable, the ultimate ideal is the highest spiritual attainment possible. Therefore, each of our ideals, such as aspects of love or service or kindness, really serves as building blocks to the highest ideal. Ideas versus ideals. Although each of us might have different ideas, plans, or goals about how things should be done, the readings advise that in spite of all our differences, we can share a common why. Even during the turmoil and international chaos of the 1930s, the readings gave us a type of prescription that could serve to bring all of humanity together. In spite of the fact that each nation had different ideas, Casey suggested that the world could share a common ideal. That ideal was his answer to the world. This is the reading. The world, as a world, has lost its ideal. Man may not have the same idea. All men may have the same ideal. That can only come with having the one ideal. Not one idea has, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy neighbor as thyself. This is the whole law. This is the whole answer to the world, to each and every soul. That the answer to the world conditions as they exist today. Edgar Casey reading 3976-8. Repeatedly, the readings encourage us to become aware of what we are building within ourselves, because ultimately we'll have the chance to meet